Hello, and welcome to The Fool and the Philosopher.
The Philosopher and The Fool.
So I have a friend I've been wanting to talk about since Thanksgiving. Because I went over to a friend's house for Thanksgiving, and it was really nice. It's really cool, actually. I don't know if you've done this before, but finally getting to that point in life where you go to your friend's house for Thanksgiving with a bunch of other friends, and you invite the neighbors over, and you each bring something, except I didn't bring anything. And you have a dinner that's your own. There's something really neat about it.
Yeah, there was a period in my life where I had 3 Thanksgivings, but I had 4 Thanksgivings, I guess. Each was with a different family, so it wasn't quite that situation. It's like the kid and their parents, the kid and their parents, me and my parents, me and my parents. So I had 4 Thanksgivings.
Yeah, I've been over to my best friend's house for Thanksgiving lots, but this was just more of just all of us doing it on our own initiative, and it was really nice. And one of the friends there, I really like her, but we don't get to talk very often. We've, not just lately, in our lives, we've talked very little. But whenever we do, we just hit it off immediately. Her and I don't know. We're very different people in a lot of ways, but we click well, we interact well. And one of the things I think that makes her, and I think she probably interacts well with a lot of people, and that's what I want to talk about. It's really interesting, where she does something that, and I've been trying to think of how to conceptualize this, and so you can call me out on this because it's not quite correct what I'm going to say, but I'm just trying to dig towards the center. But she listens to people when they talk, and
so I was just thinking, that's why you click so well with her. You're just,
well, that's partly it, because she likes listening to me talk, which is, I'm not saying that's that unusual, but she actually would rather listen, I think, to a degree. But I have another friend who, the guy, he's amazing at chess and soccer and whatnot.
Yeah.
He doesn't talk. You can talk to him and he'll just be quiet, and he's totally content with being silent, and it's kind of freaky.
Yeah.
It throws me off a lot of the time. We're really close friends, him and I too, actually, but it really throws me off because I'm talking, and then he just kind of smiles and nods. Okay. And but with her, why I say she listens, and it's a bit more than listening, is, so we were talking about neutrinos and how they are a really weird particle because they change form. Yeah. So they will, I've heard it described as they will act so they'll get shot from the sun as a tennis ball, then they'll bounce off of something like a American football, and then they'll suddenly have the volume of a basketball. This is all relative. They're tiny, obviously. They're subatomic particles, I think. But
Yes, they are subatomic particles. That's about the most I can add to my knowledge of neutrinos. Everything else you're saying, I have no idea, but they are very small.
Yeah, well, I was wondering if they're atomic sized. I don't know if they're smaller than atoms or not, but
neutrinos? Oh, they are atomic then, yes.
Okay.
Sorry, they're subatomic, yes. They're smaller than atoms.
So they act very strangely. But the other strange thing about them is they don't interact with matter.
Yeah.
They're very hard to detect. Earth is bombarded by them constantly by the sun. But a detection thing for them needs to be a massive screen to get just a tiny fraction of them, because the odds of them interacting with matter is very, very small. They go straight through things. And that's why they can leave the sun in the first place, because they just don't interact with matter. So we were talking about this, everyone at the Thanksgiving, and one of my friends there, he was saying how his dad watched this documentary on neutrinos and was just obsessed with them for a week, and that was just a week before we started talking about neutrinos. So it was this funny coincidence. And other people were saying, oh, that's weird, physics gets so strange, that sort of thing. And what she said, this friend of mine, she said, do you think neutrinos get lonely? And it's just kind of amazing. That takes a lot. You have to be listening. You have to be engaged with the conversation, right? You have to be very creative and thinking about an issue. And I just thought that was one of the most fascinating replies to something or questions I've ever heard. And she said, it would be so awful. You couldn't touch any. You just pass through them all. And I thought it was remarkable. And you imagine a ghost would be pretty lonely, obviously, passing through things.
Mm-hmm.
But she does a few things like that, where she'll reply with a very perpendicular angle observation.
Yes, perpendicular angle observation, I think, is an accurate way of putting it.
Which,
If that is other things replies like that.
so if you're when you and I discuss something, I think there's some rapport and we're talking back and forth to a degree, and we're working around an issue and trying to figure it out. But we're working in a very narrow dimension in some ways, and then she comes in with her third dimension. Like, we're working on a two-dimensional plane, and then she comes in with the three-dimensional. Do neutrinos get lonely? And adds so much richness to the concept in a way. And it's a very silly question in some ways, but it's also not, I don't know, it's not stupid. It's not stupid
well,
at all.
if I want to sound very smart, I would say it adds a hypothetical angle to metaphysical physics of theoretical properties.
Maybe.
Well, so I say that's complete bunk.
But it got me thinking about neutrinos, actually, today, and how they are... the way neutrinos act reminds me of how energy can appear around black holes out of nowhere and fly off away from them. And that's Hawking radiation. You have negative energy goes into the black hole and positive leaves. And how in an absolute vacuum, if you put two metal plates close to each other, there will be an energy field between them. So energy just kind of arises from what I remember. I could be off here. But it makes me think that neutrinos remind me of a four-dimensional being moving through a three-dimensional world. If you spun a four-dimensional object in 3 dimensions, you would get an object that looked like it was growing and shrinking and changing form.
Yeah, well, quarks can rotate more than 360 degrees.
Yeah. And the neutrino could be passing through life because it's missing it. Like, it's just going around everything. And
4-dimensional, well, it's a 5-dimensional particle. So.
We were talking about how you were doing paperwork for the government in your dreams.
Didn't find anything on that.
No, me neither. There is an idea called morphonic fields, which is a idea in biology, whereby I already forgot. I think animals, like flocks of birds, communicate in sync. I believe that's what it is to describe. And there's a idea that might extend to humans, that we can communicate on a higher level, and you can tap into that and communicate with humans with your mind, essentially, but not using it for paperwork or anything that I've found.
Yeah. Well, I'd search dream bureaucracy, and it's like a dream bureaucracy job position.
Oh, yeah, that would...
And it made it very hard to search because it didn't quite know the tangential way to put it.
It's hard to look up. Yeah. Much harder now that DuckDuckGo is compromised as well.
Yeah.
I'm using Swiss cows, and it's not... I don't know. I don't know how good it is or not, but it's definitely different, so I'm not used to it.
Yeah.
And it's a little sensitive. I was trying to find the carnal remains in Blasphemous. It's a lot of Catholic imagery, right? Yeah. So I looked up cardinal remains location or something. I wasn't trying to find them. I had done something I thought I might have bugged the game, so I was trying to look up if I had bugged out the cardinal remains. And Swiss cows blocked it because they block pornography. But it's so random seeming. Like I mean, carnal remains you can kind of see.
Yeah.
But that's like carnal just means meat or flesh. It is. Yeah. It's carnal relations is relationships of the flesh, essentially, is what that means, and that's where the expression comes from. Mm-hmm. So a lot of those things are only tangentially related, but they supersede the original meaning. That happens a lot.
Yeah.
The guy I watched, Mr. Samuel Streamer, was he was doing this bit where he was talking about his Arcadius, the guy who had tons of children.
Yeah.
I think I talked about this before, actually.
Yes,
where everything he said just became an innuendo. And he said, what have we done to the English language?
Yeah. It's very true on the innuendo thing, honestly. So on the 4-dimensional, I actually saw something, an interesting little video on it, which is a guy was showing, so here's 2-dimensional beings, and he has 2 stickmen drawn, and there's a wall between them. It says, now this stick man can't see the other stick man, and that one can't see that one. But you can see both of them, and you can see the wall, and you can see inside the wall. And so by using that, now a four-dimensional being...
So there's a platformer, which I forget the name of, but it's a four-dimensional platformer.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to come out about 10, 12 years ago.
But then the writer went insane.
Well, I don't think it's out yet.
Because he summoned angle dogs, or what they're called.
Corner hounds.
Yeah.
No, I don't know what happened, but it still hasn't come out as far as I'm aware. However, about 6 or 7 years ago, a Minecraft map maker made the four-dimensional platformer in Minecraft.
Mm.
So you can play it in Minecraft. And it is really weird. There's sections where you have to go around walls by rotating in the fourth dimension and then sidestepping and then rotating and then you're on the other side of the wall.
Yeah. I was sort of thinking about, like, know how we can draw a line on a two-dimensional plane. Like a fourth-dimensional being could be, like, if it was interacting with the world, it could be really weird. Like, if they could make a simulacrum of a person somehow and then interact with us and giggle.
So Grant Morrison...
Like, it sticks its fingers and then it's, like, walking about, but it's...
So Grant Morrison made a comic where a four-dimensional being is attacking someone.
Yeah.
And it's... You can see inside its body to a degree because as it rotates, its flesh becomes disconnected, essentially, from the viewpoint of the human. Which I think you wouldn't actually... I think he gets it slightly wrong because you wouldn't see its bones ever. Yeah. You would see the outside of its body from all different angles. So it would have a bunch of disconnected outside of its body.
Yeah.
So unless it has bone on the outside of its body, you wouldn't be seeing
Well, you'd see bones if you could see the cross sections of it when it's like...
Right, but there wouldn't be a cross section.
Right, yeah.
Because you would see a floating ball, which would be just... that would be the cross section of a three-dimensional cross section of a four-dimensional being. Yeah. So you would never see inside it. But it's really interesting because it's a comic. So you can kind of see from the four-dimensional being's point of view. So the guy runs from it, and it's massive. Yeah. So the guy's in his house, and he runs into the other room and locks the door. And so it reaches around the wall. Yeah. Like coming out of the panel and reaching around the wall of the completely enclosed room. Mm-hmm. And you see it reach around the wall to grab him.
Yeah, you could draw it because you're using... It's basically 3D being in a two-dimensional setting, but the setting is meant to be in 3D.
So it can just step out of the fourth wall, literally, and chase him around. So it looks like it can walk through walls. It can walk around walls, but the guy can't escape it because it can step around whatever obstacle he puts in its path. Yeah. And so it is a kind of cool comic that was made. And they're very, I don't know, four dimensions kind of makes... So yeah, that with the energy. Imagine you had a plane intersecting ours, right? Like a four-dimensional plane. Yeah. Then you and, let's say, a four-dimensional energy being passed through our plane. It would appear like energy appeared out of nowhere, right? Yeah. So I haven't looked into this, but it would seem to me that you could very easily explain energy appearing and disappearing and neutrinos passing through stuff and changing form with extra dimensions. And like you pointed out, quarks already have 6 different spins, so they would have to be in, 5 dimensions or something. I don't know how that works.
Yeah, they get quantum, and that's also where the neutrinos fall under, is they do get quantum.
I really want to talk about something, but I can't because it's such a spoiler to such an important thing. It's such a cool thing. Yeah. But,
And when I say it gets quantum, is small things get weird and start breaking rules of big things.
In the Pratchett sense. Yes. Not in the actual sense of the word being discrete.
Yeah, things get weird and then the rules change. And the link between particle theory and string theory and all that breaks down.
Okay. Oh, so this... completely unrelated.
A complete tangent.
Yes. But it's also very, very weird. And it might tie back into the quantum.
We'll see what I can do.
Well, no, let's not try. Let's have a proper conversation, right? Where I destroy the So, the most important animal in all of human existence, right? Maybe the second most important if dogs are the first, but I'm not sure if dogs are, is extinct. The auroch.
A giant bull?
Yeah, they're extinct. And that is crazy to think about. They only went extinct a few hundred years ago. And they were responsible for human civilization. They were our meat. They plowed our fields. They gave us milk. They gave us leather. The cave paintings, all you see is aurochs on them, right? People hunting aurochs, people raising aurochs. They have been with humans from the beginning.
I mean, the Minoans? They're very important in Minoan culture.
Yeah, they worshipped bulls, like the aurochs.
They kind of worship. The Minotaur comes from the auroch.
But this is the most important animal in human existence. And
in not domestication, what is it called? Where you get cattle and sheep and like the rearing of animals. There's like agriculture and
ranching?
Sure, we could say ranching. Would be ranching, I think. The settlement and domain of humans.
I'm not sure what you
Husbandry,
mean.
that's it.
I'm not sure what you mean.
It's the most important creature to humans in the term of human-animal husbandry.
No, I think it's the most important animal to humans. It's the core of our being. And like without it, we wouldn't be around. So here's another example. Aleph, the first letter. Yeah. The sound of the first breath, Aleph, in the Hebrew alphabet, is shaped like it's a triangle with two lines coming off it. It's the head of an auroch. It's the first animal. It's the most important of the animals. So each letter represented something, and the first letter represented the first and most important, and it represents the auroch. Aleph flipped upside down is the letter A. We still use that today.
Well, could it not be argued that the cow has replaced auroch?
The cow is a descendant of the auroch. Yeah. But it is a different animal. Probably not a different species entirely, but they are a descendant of it. But I find it very weird that
something so important is kind of...
Like, think about 200 years from now, because aurochs have only been extinct for not super long, like 200 or 400 years, I think. But imagine 400 years from now, dogs will go extinct. And humans just go about their lives as normal, because they never knew about the dogs. But they see all these pictures of dogs and all these drawings of dogs.
Well, I assume we'd have some kind of companion still.
Yes, but we wouldn't have that thing that made us who we are, that we brought with us. Like, if you go to another planet and you leave everything behind, and then there's these stories and that's all you have. Or if you go to another continent, you leave that behind.
Well, I think it's happened even more than with the auroch, because the old horses are gone.
And the deer of... the giant deer, the elk of the UK.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of the bears are gone, and the wolves. The wolves were a huge part of the Isles, and they killed all of them. But just don't go into the forest, there's wolves.
But
you're a shepherd, you need to guard the flock from the wolves.
And so that is something. UK, actually, in particular, is a astounding example, because it is now a place of rolling fields. But historically, it's famous for being...
full of giant forests.
It's a forest, a massive forest, a dark, scary forest. That's why there's all these crazy legends about people. And so ley lines. Did I tell you about this?
No.
So ley lines are not about magic. What happened was there was a guy doing a exploration of England, and he noticed that when he plotted out all the towns and all the markers and all the ancient cairns and the ancient statues and the ancient crossroads, and he put them on a map, they all formed perfectly straight lines. And the lines all passed through places that ended in the letter L-E-Y. So like there might be like Wesley, and this one goes through Tornley, and this one goes through Palinley, that sort of thing. And so he called them the ley lines, because they all ended with L-E-Y.
So I was just thinking in my head, take that, Wiccans.
Well, the Wiccans adapted that because they thought that they were guided in the building of these lines for the purpose, because why did they make these perfectly straight lines?
Yeah. And
so the theory of the Wiccans is that these are energy lines, and you build along them, and that gives you... That's where the energy centers are.
Good juju.
His theory was that it was so hard to navigate Britain because of the forests.
Yeah.
There wasn't really even roads. It was hard to build a road and dangerous to build a road.
Yeah.
So there was winding paths, but
through the oak forest.
But it was
No, the oak. Have you ever seen the inside of oak forest in pictures?
Yeah, very dark.
Yeah, but it's open. Like you can walk about with your head being clear. We don't really get that with our forest, but you can walk. There's space. It's just there's no light.
Yeah. And
Anything could be in there.
so yeah, anything can. Bears were a huge risk. There's all sorts of mythology about bears,
Wolves, dragons.
bandits. And so what he figures is people built these perfectly straight lines. So if you were leaving a town and you knew where a marker was, you could go to that marker, and then as long as you had your bearings right, you could keep going in a straight line and you'd never get lost.
Perhaps have a compass.
You could perhaps have a compass, but you could also just say, well, town was that way, and so I'll keep going this way. And so he thought it might have been a navigational aid to get around. So you built everything in straight lines so you wouldn't get lost. And that is an aspect of the Britain that is gone.
Yeah.
They don't have forests anymore. They don't have ways to rebuild. It's actually the I think it was the Vikings, like the Danish Vikings, when their fleet was destroyed, they immediately planted a bunch of trees.
Yeah.
So that they could rebuild their navy and reconquer their lands and go out. And those trees finished growing like 50 years ago or 20 years ago or something. So just keep an eye out, because.
Well.
But the time frame is really weird, that they would think that boats would still be relevant.
Yeah.
Because there has not been, as far as I can tell, a point of stagnation in history.
As great as.
No, like there hasn't been.
Yeah.
Like there was maybe the reign of the Roman Empire was a period of stagnation. Maybe.
No, not even.
Well, that was what, 500 years.
The criticization of the Roman Empire's death is about the last 50 years was extreme stagnation, but that was only stagnation within the Roman Empire, and even then there was still development.
There's industry and whatnot, but is technology advancing?
Well, so the Roman Empire is big, right? And you know the dying man of Europe, the Ottomans, stopped progressing.
Yeah.
So yes, there was stagnation within Rome, but China was still doing things, the East was still doing things, the barbarians were doing things, and culture was progressing in Rome. There was some stagnation, but culture still progressed in different areas. Rebels were appearing, Christianity was taking off like nothing.
Right. But if you lived in Europe during the Roman Empire, you could be safe in assuming that 100 years from now, your children would live in a world similar to the one you lived in.
Probably.
But I don't think that's normal.
That's what the Roman Empire offered people, with the Pax Romanus, and there's always a bigger front to conquer, and the soldiers are out on the line, and you live here. That is what Rome offered. So I think they actually did that on purpose to themselves, is trying to stay a bubble trapped in the past.
But I don't think that's normal. And the more I've been learning about history, and like I said, I want to do something more in depth on this at some point, but it seems to me you can take someone like Archimedes.
Yeah.
And you can say that he probably represents the most one person can do in a lifetime in terms of advancement.
Yeah.
And I don't think technology has ever gone much above what Archimedes did. I think that it's gone a little bit above at this point, but not much. And only in specific areas has it gone above what Archimedes did. What I think has happened since the Renaissance especially is the floor has been raised, but I don't think the ceiling has really changed. So I think you have a whole lot of people that know a whole lot more than the average person did 200 years ago. But I don't actually think the ceiling of human achievement has changed that much throughout history.
I'm going to disagree with the know a whole lot more, because while watching videos of Eric's art and them being in the forest, and how pitiful they were and attempting to light a fire and surviving, and there is trajectories of knowledge that some people simply do not have.
Right. In terms of technological advancement, let's say.
Okay.
Not generalized knowledge.
Yeah, because there's so many people that have no idea how you would construct a shelter or a house.
So there's this view of history that it moves in one direction, right? It moves forward.
Well, that's why I say it didn't stagnate because culture and religion moved.
But I don't think it does.
Yeah.
I think that what happens is you have geniuses like Archimedes or
Tesla,
or But I don't think it's people we know about. I think there's been millions of these people throughout time. Socrates. And they raised society to basically what we have in modern day on their own, single-handed. Euclid is another one. I saw this thing. Did I talk about this? Where it was a Gaia presentation, and they were talking about sacred geometry.
No. You said you wanted to talk about the pyramids, but we haven't gone into it.
Well, I won't this time either, because it's hard to think with my voice being rough as well. And I want to be clear of head. So...
I'll be clear of head when talking about Gaia stuff.
Yeah. I'm actually really disappointed. I was really excited to do some stuff today, but it's fine. I'll do it next time. Gaia was talking about sacred geometry and how all around the world there's identical sacred geometry. And so their theory is there's some precursor civilization, ancient civilization, wisdom. And I think that, I think there very well could be a precursor civilization, but I don't think the sacred geometry is proof in the slightest of that. And so the guy was saying, we need a mathematician to look at this because math is the universal language. 30 years from now, we'll all be speaking math. If we find aliens, we'll talk to them in math. So he's absolutely wrong. Math is not universal, it's made up. It has 5 core axioms that Euclid made up at the beginning. He said you can draw a straight line, you can draw a circle, and I don't remember the others, but math is very strictly made up by humans for humans.
Yes.
And there is no... And he also said something like, no matter where you are in the universe, 1 + 1 = 2. He's totally wrong. If you're in a black hole, 1 + 1 = 1.
Yep.
10 + 1 = 1. 10 + 3 = 1. If you're talking about fire, 1 + 1 = 5. If you're talking about, or 1, depending on how you look at it. If you're talking about a nuclear bomb, 1 + 1 = a billion.
Yeah.
That is not how math works. It's how the math we decided to use works. And what we ended up with eventually is non-Euclidean math, which is typically math done on spheres. And another one of Euclid's rules, 2 parallel lines will never cross.
Yeah.
On a sphere, that's not true. If you take 2 longitudinal lines, and which are the lines layered vertically around the world, they are parallel. However, if you follow them all the way to the pole, they intersect. So Euclidean geometry doesn't apply to globes and a bunch of other things. So math isn't universal, and it is specific based on where you put it. And not only that, but you could say, but sacred geometry is the same everywhere. So how did that happen? Like, it's crazy, all this really in-depth stuff. So there's a game you can get called Euclidia, where you essentially do what Euclid did over his life's work. It's much easier to do now because most of us, even if we aren't aware of it, have a realization of Euclid stuff just because we were taught in school. Euclid had to figure this out on his own. But it's not that hard for a single person to come up with all of sacred geometry.
Well, sacred geometry is just observation.
Yeah, it's paying attention.
That is the biggest thing humans do, is observation.
Well, that was what Aristotle was all about, all you have to do is think.
Yeah, but the human evolutionary mind is bright fruit, freaky snake pattern. You take those 2 things, put them together, you're going to notice everything.
But sacred geometry in particular is... So there's something called the seed of life, and there's something called the fruit of life. And they're these very complex shapes. But if you just spend some time with a compass and a ruler, you will develop these things.
Yeah.
And it's not even that long. Like, if you spend probably a week at it, you'll get them. And that's us now. Back then, I'm sure it took Euclid a couple months because he didn't have any idea what he was doing. He was just... Or maybe he did in a day because he was just playing in the dirt. There's also a story my mom was telling me about that happened up here ages ago, where a European guy, he had his knee shattered, destroyed. And he was out hunting in the backcountry here, just nothing around. Just thought he was going to die. And some First Nations found him. And they put him on a sled and they took him back home, saved his life. Yeah. But not only did they save his life, they did knee surgery on him. And they fixed his knee perfectly. They did advanced knee surgery. And my mom was talking about it, and she's saying, wow, medical technology was way more advanced than we thought with the First Nations. But I was thinking it might not have been. Because medical science today still is awful in a lot of ways. And so what I think medical science is, for the most part, is geniuses. You go to the surgeon who's an expert, right?
Yeah.
You go to the guy who specializes in heart surgery or knee surgery. You don't go to the intern who's just followed the book. You go to these people with these perfect track records and they're geniuses in the field. And I think that maybe this woman, the First Nation woman, was just that. She was just really good at knee surgery. And I think that scientific advancement doesn't create these people. I think scientific advancement makes people who aren't geniuses better.
Yeah.
So you have the general doctor you can go to for a surgery, but if you need the really important surgery, you go to the specialist.
Yeah.
And so I think I don't think that humans have advanced very much at all through all of history. I think what's happened is you have a genius who arises in a, like, you remember Fire Maker?
Yeah.
Fire Hunter, whatever it's called?
Firecatcher.
The dude invents...
That's the name, is Firecatcher.
The dude invents a bow and an atlatl and a spear and...
A pot.
And darts and pottery.
And blankets.
And bear hunting techniques. And he tames wolves.
And housing.
Yeah. And I think there was probably people like that throughout history. And I think what happens is most of them don't have children. And just they get killed.
Yeah.
And some of them do have children. And they don't pass it on. And it gets lost. But some of them do tell it to their children. And their children tell it to their grandchildren. But then the whole tribe gets wiped out in a freak flood.
Yeah.
But so what happens is, I think you've had people get to basically Renaissance level technology constantly throughout time in like one generation, maybe two. Now, obviously, you don't have... What you need is a stable enough society for long enough with enough communication and passing these values on that you can do something with that knowledge.
Also, infrastructure.
Yeah, because you have someone like Archimedes. He probably could have developed a spaceship, but he didn't have the aluminum. He didn't have access to aluminum.
Yeah.
But the stuff he made with his limited resources is stuff we don't do today. And you look at something like, if you look at a lot of ancient stuff, so there was a bracelet found. It's 40,000 years old. It was made by Denisovans. And 40,000 years old. It's this smooth, I think it's chalcedony or something, bracelet. And it looks like it was hand polished by, a machine today, let's say. 40,000 years old. Older than human civilization as we know it to an extent. Not even made by humans. Which...
It's made by a giant.
I just find that mind-blowing on its own. Denisovans are humans, right? But they're different humans.
Yeah, well, that's why you can say made by a giant.
But I always thought of these people as not having society, right? Yeah. But the fact that they made a bracelet shows that they did have society. And that shows that, well, there you go. There's other intelligent life in the universe, essentially.
Yeah.
There's other civilizations that have arisen that aren't human ones. And I find that amazing. And that was 40,000 years ago. And I think that this has actually been going on for much longer than that. And I'll get into that later. But, not on this podcast. But I am beginning to develop the theory that if you started humans from ground zero, with no knowledge of anything, you would be up to the ancient Egyptians in a single generation. Possibly further than the ancient Egyptians. I don't think that when people talk about the progress of time, it was like, the Stone Age, and then there was this Bronze Age, and this Iron Age, and then we had the great Egyptians, and then we had the Greeks, and we had the Romans. I don't think that happened. I think you had a bunch of people sitting around a field, and then they built, the pyramids, and then, but, the pyramids before the pyramids, let's say. And then they didn't write it down well enough, or they got, they all got the plague and died. And so other people moved into the ruins. They didn't really know what was going on. They're just like, huh. And then a genius appeared somewhere else in, China. And suddenly they had gunpowder, and they had oil running through pipes, and they had all this. And then they kind of kept that going. And I think that archaeology has seriously underestimated human potential. Because what they saw was the Industrial Revolution slowly increasing in technology up to the present day. But I don't think that's actually happened. Because you look at someone like Tesla, and we're still not sure what he did. He made a machine that caused an earthquake in New York.
What?
He
made
a machine... Yeah, he there's concerns that he would have destroyed New York. He also made a machine that could harness energy from the atmosphere for free. And he made a death ray. And his idea was that it would stop violence because people would be too afraid to... Now, how many of these things worked, how many of this is true, I'm not sure. Because, his factory burnt down, which is part of it. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a story just to give you a little teaser of something completely unrelated to this in a way. But there's a people called the Tucana people in the Amazon. We only contacted them like 5, 10, 20 years ago. So they've been isolated from all of humans for all of history. They have a story that they were brought to the Amazon. Right. So their story goes that the Tucana people were brought to the Amazon by some people, by the gods, right? They were brought to the Amazon by the gods, in particular, someone called the Helmsman and someone called the Daughter of the Sun, who took them in their I think it was a flying, scaled serpent ship, canoe. It was a canoe, serpent canoe, and dropped them off in the Amazon. And they gave them, as a parting gift, ayahuasca. And ayahuasca is that thing I was telling you about where you communicate with the aliens that are like, hey, finally you can contact us.
Yeah.
So, this is... Does that not sound like to you? The Helmsman and the Daughter of the Sun. A fusion reactor and the pilot of a spaceship.
I mean, the Helmsman is just a pilot.
Yes. And the Daughter of the Sun. That's a fusion reactor, right?
Could be.
So why I'm saying this is when you read Brandon Sanderson or Orson Scott Card.
Yeah.
And they have these stories in their books about they said there was 12 gods that split off in their flying ships and they crashed into the ground, like in Pathfinder, right?
Yeah.
There was the 12 gods and they crashed into the ground and they had these immortals that served them. And you're reading that, you're like, oh, this is way too on the nose. It's obvious that they are a stranded sci-fi civilization. Or if you read the Kensho series and you remember, have you read the Kensho series?
No.
So in the Kensho series, there are these samurai mystics on a planet, and they have this vague memory. So what happened was the ship crashed there, and there's this mind virus on the whole planet, and it killed basically everyone. And so the captain of the ship, who was a master martial artist, decided he would save the rest of his crew by teaching them sword fighting. And so he taught them Kensho, which is forget. But he taught them. He taught them of Mushin, which is no mind.
Yeah, the way of Musashi.
Yeah. So and they call this mind virus Mushin because that's how you defeat it.
Yeah.
And so you have to be perfectly in the zone with your sword fighting, and then you're immune to the mind virus essentially. So they make these monks that swarm the virus around them, and it protects them, and they also keep it away from everyone else, and everyone can survive. And they have these legends of them coming to this place in these ships from the stars. Or if you read the Homecoming series, I can't. Orson Scott Card is a series about these people who all lose their memories and crash on a planet, and then they become a medieval society, and they're just like, we were here for some reason, but we don't remember why. Or Orson Scott Card's story, A Planet Called Treason, where they're on a planet with all the iron that was destroyed, so that they're trapped there as prisoners.
Yeah.
All these stories they have like in their lore, like, oh, there was this thing that was, we were brought by the people from the stars, and it's so obvious as a reader. You were clearly a starfaring civilization that got stranded, right?
So you're saying the Emperor is going to show up?
I'm saying that when you read a story and there's a person called the Helmsman and someone called the Daughter of the Sun, you go, could he have been more obvious that this was once a starfaring civilization? This is a story that you kind of have.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying... This isn't related, by the way, to people's technology being more advanced than ever. Like that, like all throughout time. Those are two separate thoughts.
Yeah.
But they are related in the sense that I think civilization might extend back far further than we think. But even if it doesn't, I don't think it might. I don't think that before the Ice Age, people were just grunting around in fields with spears for 10,000 years.
They were actually a whole bunch of telemarketers and phone booth cleaners.
Yeah, but no. I don't think the Stone Age existed. Right. I don't think there was a period of 10,000 years where people just did the same thing. I don't think people have ever been in stagnation. I think they came up to the Egyptian time and died again and again and again because they just didn't, they got unlucky every time. And we finally got lucky and we were able to get writing.
Well, I think the thought of the Stone Age is the evolution and development of a human from grunty lowbrow to gorilla to upright meat eating.
Well, then let's say the Bronze Age, where you're just stuck with... I think within a single individual's lifetime, you can have a massive amount of change. And so I don't think that you ever have a period of stagnation. I think you have a period of rise and fall.
Yeah, you can have a massive amount of but then you get your head cut off, or a bear eats you, or you die of a disease.
I don't think so. I think what happens is society advances hugely, and then it collapses, and advances hugely, and it collapses. And so it appears from, if you zoom out, it appears fairly stagnant because they're never going past a certain point. But I think they're within a person's lifetime, they're advancing hugely. And because the more you look at like all of history, it gets kind of weird because you realize that this is all made up. History is just what the historians said happened. They don't know what happened. They're guessing. They're using carbon dating on. So
we do have some of the Chinese records.
Yeah, but we don't have all of them. We have the little, like the Library of Alexandria burned. So here's
the Chinese records are destroyed.
The Mayan record. So 3 civilizations had huge records, right? The Chinese, the Greeks, and the Mayans. The Chinese destroyed their own records. Yeah. Alexandria was an accident, theoretically. The Mayans were destroyed by the Spanish. We have lost our past. We have no idea what happened. So remember that's in the Library of Alexandria was the pelt of a gorilla.
Yes.
Yeah. We only know that because we have a record, but we don't have the pelt. And so gorillas were thought to be not real until 100 years ago or 200 years ago.
It's about 100 years.
Would have been a bit more because Tarzan was written.
It's about 160, 200. Yeah, we'll go 200.
And so we have lost so many things. I told you that story about Plato, where we're like, oh yeah, the Younger Dryas event. But if you just go to the ancient Egyptians, and did I tell you how they learned Coptic? Did I tell you about that?
No.
So you know how we translated Egyptian language?
Wasn't it the Rosetta Stone? Rosetta
Stone was part of it, but we know how to pronounce Egyptian. Mm. And we also couldn't translate everything with the Rosetta Stone. It didn't quite get all the symbols.
I mean, the Rosetta Stone's still an amazing piece of technology.
So what the guy did, who did the translation, who was working with Rosetta Stone, he did this brilliant thing, which it's kind of mind-boggling, because we can do this today still. He went and talked to the Egyptians, because they still spoke Egyptian. Mm. You just had to go south of Cairo to the people that lived off in the wilderness, and they were still speaking ancient Egyptian. They were still speaking Coptic. And he said, yeah, what's this character? And like, oh yeah, it's this. How's he pronounce it? Oh, like this. And they weren't quite the same. So he had to make them work.
Imagine how many Rosetta Stones were destroyed.
So
do you know what the Rosetta Stone is?
It was a treaty?
So Ramses II basically had a huge trading empire. It's like the richest Egypt has ever been was under him. And because of this empire, he needed to talk with Greeks and people everywhere. And so he literally made a giant stone that translated all the basic languages of his trading partners.
So that's another thing.
Rosetta Stone is actually like a giant stone just covered in writing.
So there was the Greeks, there was the Persians, there was the Egyptians. They were the 3 major powers, right?
Yeah.
Around the time of the Rosetta Stone, a Syrian farmer found the Hittite, I believe they were called, empire. Maybe not the Hittite, something like that. But he found their city. There was another. We had written all of human history. This is human history. Yeah. The Sea People completely wiped out an entire civilization equivalent to the Egyptians and the Greeks and the Persians. That was just north of the Egyptians. And it's right there. Bam. So our view of history is missing everything. I talked to you about the fight book where there was tanks, there was scuba diving gear in the medieval ages.
Yeah.
I don't think the medieval ages were anything like they're depicted. There was something called the fire lance in the medieval age. You'd stick a cannon on the tip of your spear. This is 1200s on.
Yeah.
In Europe, you'd stick like a cannon on the tip of your spear. You'd light it, and then when someone charged you, you'd stab, and it would explode and shoot up fire, and you'd burn them, and it was like a shock weapon. It was one use, but you terrify people. Guns were being used in China from like the late 1200s.
They were used in the 800s.
Not hand cannons. They were using rockets.
Yeah.
But
in the 800s they had rockets though.
When I was reading about the Hwacha, it was so funny. It's like it's a mass rocket launcher. I was like, right? Yes. Okay. Yes. But that just puts a totally different thing in mind.
The rockets had metal points on the ends of them.
Oh yes, the Koreans are famous for their rocket launchers.
They had metal points on the ends of their rockets.
But like handguns were happening late 1200s.
Yeah.
They came over to Europe late 1300s. Our view of
the Egyptians had batteries.
Now a handgun. So take D&D.
Yeah.
You're not going to use a handgun in that sort of period because they're used against armies. Because you can't aim a handgun. You just kind of fire it in the direction of the enemy. You want like an arquebus to shoot at someone, like if you wanted one-on-one combat. Yeah. So D&D not having guns makes sense, but it should have fire lances. So I've added fire lances to First Heroes. But full plate was invented 300 years after guns, minimum. And full plate was around in the time there was like scuba gear and tanks and helicopter inventions like Leonardo's. And Leonardo was basing his stuff on older stuff. So our view of history is very, very warped.
Well, the Bible is the story of the Tower of Babel.
Yeah. Well, it'll be with the pyramids, but...
Yes. I'm just saying. It's people very quickly dismiss the story of the Tower of Babel, but...
I think the pyramids are potentially more advanced than stuff we have today, still. And I'll get into that. It's not crazy.
Aliens.
No, that's my point is totally the opposite.
Yeah.
Humans are capable of this within a generation or two. So there's a guy, right, in the States. He's building Stonehenge.
He built it.
Yeah. And this is technology he came up with on his own.
Yes.
That isn't...
He also built Stonehenge by himself. He didn't have a bunch of friends.
Yeah.
He did it by himself.
That isn't 10,000 years of human knowledge and advancement. That's one smart guy. So a guy in the UK built a castle, Coral Castle, on his own. No how.
Yeah.
That is one smart guy. Tesla, one smart guy. Now, I might sound like a crazy proponent of the great man theory, which I think I am to a degree. And I do think that we need to completely reconceptualize our view of the medieval ages. And I think what we view as the medieval ages, we have to think more of the depiction of classical fantasy, let's say, is missing. It's what you're doing is you're looking at a dinosaur without a trunk. You're looking at a skeleton without a trunk, right?
Yeah.
You're looking at only the very few records that survive because the Library of Alexandria burned.
So we have to add feathers to all the...
Yeah, you have to add feathers and trunks to all of history. You have to add back in the tanks. You have to add back in the diving suits. You have to add back in, I don't know, hang gliders, air balloons. The Nazca potentially had air balloons.
So there's elements, right, that we have limited supplies of. And they could be gone.
Yeah, they
could have shot lightning. That's like the far theoretical stream, but...
Yeah, well, I don't even need to go into that to make my point that to get something like Stonehenge takes a single hunter-gatherer with a dream. It doesn't take 10,000 years of advanced civilization.
And a bunch of druids.
Yeah, the whole idea that human civilization only started 40,000 years ago, I think is nonsense. I think the stuff we found is 40,000 years old, and that was just a couple guys with a good idea. I think every civilization was basically just that. So, Ramses as well. The sea people, right? We have no idea who they are still. Ramses fought them.
Yeah.
And he documented them. There is giant walls of pictures of the sea people carved into them fighting the Egyptians, because the Egyptians were the only people on Earth that won.
Really?
At first. I heard this great thing where this guy was talking about, and he said, the Egyptians were the only people that won against them, but they kept winning closer and closer to home. Because the sea peoples just slowly pushed them and pushed them and pushed them. And the thing about the sea peoples, they're drunk. They did great. They showed their clothing, their armor, their weapons. They all look totally different. The sea peoples were a massive group of different people, all working together to destroy the 4 greatest civilizations on Earth at the time, besides China, probably.
Yeah.
But they just came out of nowhere. And
China's always been China.
Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of theories that they were basically starving tribes from all over, just desperate and pushing in. But the fact that only the Egyptians could beat them is crazy. Like the fact that you took the greatest civilization on Earth to hold them off and slowly lose. But the Egyptians built these murals, massive, of this.
Well, the sea people were beaten in the end.
No, they wiped out everyone.
Well, they didn't wipe out Egypt.
Yeah, the Bronze Age collapse was the end of I don't know what happened to the Egyptians entirely, but they were not the same people at the end.
No.
As in terms of they had lost a lot.
So are we the sea people then?
Maybe.
The sea people wiped out, took everyone over, and then we have this collapse of what happened? Oh no, I was hungry. I killed this funny-looking guy.
Well, it's like the Parishendi in The Way of Kings.
Yeah.
It's like there's this legends of these invaders to this planet, and the helmsman took them there, and his flying canoe. And, I'll get into this more. I want to read more about it too, but
I want to look at the Egyptians fighting the sea people because I didn't know about that.
Here's the thing that really, really I find fascinating. The Secret Teachings of All Ages has all this crazy stuff about all sorts of stuff. Atlantis, the pyramids, the Sphinx. Like there's chambers and tunnels under the Sphinx and the pyramids. The Atlanteans had the symbol of the swan and the cross. Tons of crazy stuff. In the last 20 years, most of it's getting proven true. They found the tunnels under the pyramids. They found the chambers under the Sphinx. They think the Denisovans used the swan and the cross as their signs. They think the Denisovans might have come from the sea. Now, the Denisovan theories are actually a lot less concrete than our mom might think because of her origins book. That's actually just a wild theory that is gaining ground, but it still isn't fully locked in. But the fact that the Secret Teachings, a book written 100 years ago based on several hundred-year-old writings, is getting proven right in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Shows you, at the very least, that when people wrote stuff down, they weren't just making stuff up. And that we knew things.
So what you're saying is I'm off to find Avalord.
No. Well, me personally, I think Atlantis existed. But I think I can point to it on a map as well. But not me. I'm not the guy. Randall Karsten, I think his name, or Karsten, I can't remember. He has a very good argument for Atlantis that I find fairly convincing. Now, I'm not a believer. I don't believe in anything like I've said.
Well, just quick thing. One of the big theories on Atlantis is it's Mycenaean and the Minoans island.
Oh, the Minoans, yeah. Well, the Minoans were very advanced people. Like, very, very advanced.
Do you know about the Mycenaeans and the Minoans? You know about the Minoans. So, there was a people, I think, who appeared and wiped out the Mycenaeans. Or the Minoans. They're the Mycenaeans. We don't know anything about them, but they took over the whole island and lived there afterwards.
There's also that's the other thing. History is so full of gaps, right? Yeah. There's the Tartars. Mm-hmm. They fought the Romans, and the Romans, they destroyed Roman armies. We have no idea who they were.
Also, the Mycenaeans are possibly responsible for the siege of Troy.
Here's another thing to keep in mind. So they found a comet in Greenland. Yeah. And they dated it to being like 20, 30 million years old. Yeah. Except, so you say, oh, okay, well, there's history, right? Do you know how they date a comet buried under a glacier? They took the runoff from the water, because they can't get to the comet at all. Yeah. They can't get to the impact crater. So they took the gravel washing through the streams, and they dated that with argon dating. So this gravel could have come from anywhere, but they're like, well, probably could have come from the... So first of all, there's that, right? It's like, wow, that's our technology. Secondly, dinosaurs went extinct 65.6, something like that, million years ago. Yeah. Except a physicist was like, hey, you got the argon formula wrong. They went extinct 66 million years ago. He totally changed our knowledge of history because it was 3% off. Now imagine if the Chicxulub impact, they're like, oh, we measured the rock. We should have measured this rock. Imagine if they do that and suddenly the dinosaurs were wiped out 20 million years ago or 100 million years ago. Carbon dating for history of places, right?
The Egyptians used mammoths to build the pyramids.
Well, you know how they date the pyramids? Well, not the pyramids specifically, but temples and whatnot. They find like bones or pottery shards in there, and they carbon date those.
That could be a guy that walked in and died, or someone who put down a piece of pottery.
Or someone could have died 10,000 years before the pyramids were built. Yeah. And then they moved his body into the pyramids later because they were just like, oh, we got to move this body somewhere. Let's stick it there. Yeah. Because we can't date stone, and why we can't date stone is pretty obvious. Well, because stone is as old as the earth.
Do you know the story of the necropolis?
Of
how it got destroyed?
No.
A bunch of that. It's not the Knight Templars, but one of the Knight Orders of monks really, really needed wall reinforcements, and so they dismantled the necropolis and built a wall. And then they saw his tomb, and they freaked out because they desecrated a grave. And so they took a bunch of different stone that was less important and built a smaller building and shoved the bodies into that building. And so we think that those people in that smaller building are the people who are buried in the necropolis.
So how they dated the pyramids was there is records of massive shipments of stone for a specific dude. And we know when that dude lived, roughly. Yeah. Because we carbon dated his body. I think it was. But here's the thing. What if we carbon dated the wrong body? What if there was another dude with the exact same name? What if they were just repairing the pyramids? And the pyramids are much older than we think.
And much bigger.
And I'll get more into that later. But my main point is that we have no idea about history. And most of history, things like the Auroch, are missing from it. we've totally forgotten about the most important aspects of our history. Like if we can't remember the Auroch as if that's not day to day, we can forget anything.
Well, you know how I do my cooking? My basic cooking? I cook like a medieval person, actually. Because they have very simple, easy recipes.
Or did they?
Well,
you have no idea.
Our idea is, but they're very simple, basic recipes. And most of the recipes I've found work great for mine and your diet.
Yeah. Well, here's the other. So you saw that Gaia thing about sound. I didn't see that, but I know about the theory. Because there is all around the world in different areas.
I saw an ad for it.
People that claim they can levitate stone with sound.
Yeah.
So there's structures in Egypt that they don't claim they can do it, but they can actually cause sonic. You can actually levitate stuff with sound using ancient Egyptian structures.
Yeah.
Like small things, obviously. Like we can do that today. We can levitate stuff with sound, but you have a lot of energy for a very small effect. There's monks in Nepal that say they can do it. There's people all around the world that said they could do it. Basically, there's a story in the Bible of Jericho. They marched around the city and then it fell down. So there's a lot of stuff about that. That sounds kind of crazy because, Newton has a law, doesn't he? That
what goes up must come down.
You need an equal and opposite reaction. You need to input enough energy that could move an object to move it. You can't just sing at a rock and lift the rock. You have to put an equivalent amount of energy to lift the rock.
Well, if you use the earth to move it.
Well, here's where it ties back into the four-dimensional quantum thing, right? Yeah. Imagine you have a stream of energy rather than like a neutrino, like matter passing through. You're not creating energy from nothing. What you're doing is you're just accessing energy you can't see because it's in a different dimension. And so say that you have a way to interact with the quantum realm via some ritual. Now, the ritual is actually just a way. It's like the rice farmers who worship the rice god, and they're the best rice farmers on earth. They're doing all the right stuff that we can do with science, but they don't care about the science, they care about the ritual. So your singing could be that same ritual. Here's another thing. Granite. What if granite is a battery for sonar? You put enough like it took them 7 days to take down Jericho. What if you can put enough sound into granite to store it, and then you get enough energy to levitate it, or push it, or vibrate it? You know how vibrating things are easier to push? Like you have like your like a heavy mixer vibrated on the counter and it just slides, or a washing machine just slides across the floor. So maybe they weren't levitating them, they were just vibrating them enough that you could slide them with no friction. And that's how the Egyptians moved their stone, let's say. So I'm not saying that they could levitate stone, because I don't think they could, but maybe they could. I don't think they did. But we stumble onto all sorts of stuff all the time. That's kind of how technologies get invented, just people getting lucky and going, oh, well, what's this? Not always, but a lot of the time. So who's to say that 70,000 years ago or something, people didn't figure out the fourth dimension more than we have, let's say.
Especially with taking all that ayahuasca and going to the bureaucracy of dreams.
Yeah. Yeah, like what... I'm working on a story right now, actually, about... so you have Atlas, right?
And he shrugs.
No, and he's murdered by the son of Helios. And because Helios had the son who flew his chariot and destroyed the world. So Helios goes to Odin, and he says to Odin, you need to help. My son has gone to war with Atlas, and he's killed Atlas, and he's killing the Atlanteans. Atlas was the king of the Atlanteans. That's why they're called Atlanteans. And so Odin says something along the lines of, I'm a shut-in. I don't want to. I'm just sitting. Like, I don't want to. I can hear what's going on. I can feel the vibrations of the earth, because vibrations are huge. And alchemy is about vibrations, right? But so,
of course it is. It all ties together.
So Odin is saying, I can feel the vibrations of his destruction in his spaceship, like, because that's what it is. He's killing the world with something called the sun. It's the sun chariot or something. It's Helios's ship, the greatest ship ever, and his son isn't capable of controlling it properly, and so he goes to Odin begging him to stop it. So Odin strikes it with a lightning bolt as Zeus. So they're the same figure, and he crashes the ship into the earth.
Throws the spear that cannot miss. And
because Zeus did destroy Helios' chariot, and that caused a cataclysm. It caused massive fires, explosions, destructions as it crashed into the earth. And then the tears of Zeus' daughters, I believe, they cried so much it flooded the earth.
Yeah.
And So there's this massive scale of destruction. And so Helios decides he'll take his backup ship, the daughter of the sun, his smaller one.
Yeah.
He'll get into that, and he'll take on the role of the helmsman of the ship, and he'll go and he'll just save the other he can't save the Atlanteans, but he'll try to save just tribes people, hunter-gatherers scattered around the world, take them away from the worst zones of flooding, take them to paradises on Earth, help them out of it. And then all the Atlanteans decide they'll leave. They'll follow Orion to the realm of death. They'll go beyond the stars to the distant realm, and they'll leave, and they'll try to figure out something along that line. But some stay. Odin decides to stay. Orpheus decides to stay. Hermes Trismegistus decides to stay. And they go down and they guide the humans through the disaster and help them, and they rebuild the world. And I've just been working on this little story idea because, well, Odin and Hermes and Quetzalcoatl is another one.
Yeah.
They're these figures that just emerged from nowhere, taught everyone, and then became gods in their minds. And the story of Atlantis is that there was an Atlantean civil war, and it caused massive flooding, destroyed Atlantis, and the arrogance of the Atlanteans caused this massive cataclysm right around the time that a comet might have hit Earth. And there is a saying that every war since has been trying to justify that first Atlantean war. Because, it's like, well, we'll attack them back. Well, we'll attack them back. Because the story is that the Atlanteans declared war on the rest of the world, like the Fire Nation. They wanted to spread their technology through conquest.
Yeah.
So that was the story of Atlantis. They became arrogant and they decided they would conquer the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And then a comet struck them down.
Yeah.
Or a cataclysm happened. We don't know what it was. Zeus struck them down. He struck down Helios. But yeah, I've just been... I kind of want to do what Tolkien wanted to do with Lord of the Rings. I want to take the historical... And it might be too big, obviously, for me to do. But there is a consistency in history. And I think I could create a mythology that described the fictitious past of humanity from the point of only 12,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have the pyramids be much older than that in the story, but I'll get...
Just an ending thought. You know how technology leaps forward sideways?
Such as...
Well, we never see it coming. Like the cars.
Right.
Like the engine of the car. Like sort of came from steam, or the computer chip.
So NFTs are going to change into a storage system similar to OneDrive, where everyone has a bit of the same NFT on their computer, and they can use that to have a decentralized thing to store all their information.
Yeah.
That's going to happen. Okay? That's my prediction. So, anyways.
Yeah, but the internet, another sideways technology.
Yeah.
So, can we not lose technology sideways?
It just disappears and you're like, oh, that's gone.
Yeah, well, it's gone. But also, I mean, we sort of logically, like, this progressed this progressed this progressed this. But we could be missing a tangential technology and have no idea.
Well, we do that all the time. Psychedelics.
Yeah.
That's a huge area that we're only really pushing in the last 70 years. And it's massive.
Yeah, so imagine everything else. Like, so we're starting to look at that, but imagine all the things that we don't know anything about at all. Like, we don't even have the concept of them.
Well, the technologies that are my favorite are things like watches and bicycles. They're stuff that could have been made at any point in history and would have been amazing, but weren't. Yeah. So, like quartz watches, right? Like that's quartz. Like I was saying, granite is a battery. Quartz is a battery.
Yeah.
And granite contains quartz, so that's where my thing goes in. But you can make it, quartz vibrates at a very specific frequency, so you can keep track of time super accurately. And you just discover that, right?
Yeah.
And so there could very easily be, like plastic's another one. You can make like rubber. You can make at any point in time.
Well, the Aztecs had rubber. They had it for their game. They made rubber balls to play their game.
But not a... So there is evidence of what you're saying out there that we can just discover... Wait, if we just put these two things together, suddenly we have something that will change the world. Yeah. And anyone could have done it at any point in time, but just no one did. So I think we could discover at some point, hey, if I sing the right note, it opens a gate to the fourth dimension that like can levitate rocks.
Shoots laser beams at the pyramids.
Yeah, stuff like that. I think that is very... It's not only possible, I think it's likely. Not the specific, but something.
Yeah.
Like tomorrow we could learn about some other thing entirely that was always there and we just... never thought about it right. Mm-hmm. Like spinning a magnet above another magnet. Mm-hmm. All right, I'm just... All right, let's end there.
Yes.